but the family has become so used to this, they don't know any other way of living other than in the craziness of this world that they've become accustomed to. And so they need time too. They need therapy. They need counseling. They need help. They need time to heal. And if we don't give the family that time, then everything just goes to shit.
I wanted to ask, you touched on being a prosecutor, right? And I'm wondering if you know whether or not through law school, if they are giving more quote unquote education on mental health, substance abuse, things along those lines. Because we talk about this a lot with Dr. T, our medical doctor, who's also on the podcast, one of the co-hosts.
I think the reason your son is traumatized is because you're the problem. It's the way you've acted. It's the way you treat him. And I'm sorry, we're not going to continue to represent you. We're not going to force him into treatment. If you want this done, find another lawyer. And I told my wife, file a motion to withdraw and get rid of him. This is not what we do. We're here to help people. And if families call us and they're looking to stick it to somebody, find another lawyer. I'm not taking your case or your money, and don't call me ever again. I don't want to hear it. That's not what we do. That's not my mission. That's why I didn't practice for years.
Good, Ben?
Good to go.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
And we have a gentleman by the name of Mark, right?
Yes, Mark Astor. Nice to meet everybody. Thank you for having me.
Mark Astor. First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use. And thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us. info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. Right, Ben?
Yes, sirree.
Right, Mark?
Sounds good to me.
How you doing, Mark?
I'm good. Thank you both for having me. Nice to meet both of you.
So I'll make a brief introduction. Ben comes to me a couple weeks ago, says, I got this guy, Mark. He's an attorney, Marchman Act attorney.
Well,
or something.
That's part of what we do, but it's a whole lot more than
that. And we're going to get into, And so I'm like, sounds good. Bring him on. And so that's about the extent of what I know. But I do say this. If Ben says, hey, we need to bring somebody on, we bring him on. So, Ben, what do you got to add?
I don't think that we've ever had anybody to touch on this aspect of the treatment process. We have had more than multiple occurrences here at Rock in particular where we've had clients who've been Marchman acted, Baker acted, etc. A lot of cases start with the Baker Act, and then we kind of, through the hospital, stuff along those lines, end up putting together the funnel to get somebody the help, or other cases, the Marchman Act. And I'll let Mark jump into all this. But it's quite a bit to navigate, and I'm really excited to get some of the professional insight, because at the end of the day, it sounds to me like it's my impression and my experience that it can be a resource as well. There's a lot of cases where families don't know what to do with their loved one. They could literally be on death's door. It can be one of those cases where this person is 100% going to die if we don't get them help, or maybe it's a mental health case, something along those lines. But having this knowledge from this side of it, as far as the law goes, etc., what families can do to, I don't know, quote unquote, force someone into treatment. I don't necessarily think that that's the right verbiage, but to really get somebody to go. Because and there are cases out there, ideally, in my opinion, you do want somebody that's willing and involuntarily doing it on their own. But I will come out and say there's absolutely cases where people need to be, quote unquote, forced into treatment. And then once they get the help and their brain clears, then they dive into the process and realize, oh, I did need this, and they're thankful at the end. But it can be scary out there for families. They end up in some situations as a loved one watching your loved one basically slowly kill themselves. You're sitting there like, what can I do? They keep refusing treatment. They keep ending up homeless, whatever the case may be. But I'll let Mark speak more to this. He's the expert. I'm not going to pretend to be one in this case, but we have worked hand in hand with some attorneys through Marchman Act, not so much Baker Act stuff, because that's 72 hours and then they're with us. But why don't you...
That's another issue, but we'll talk about that too when it comes to the Baker Act.
Can I ask, before we jump into the details of Baker Act, Marchman Act, and everything that comes with that. I'm curious how you fell into this portion of law, if you will.
So it's been a very long journey for me, both professionally and personally. So I graduated law school in 1994. So I've been practicing, this is my 30th year. And for the first 5 years, I was a prosecutor right here in Palm Beach County. And, you know, when you're really green and you're a prosecutor, your mindset is, throw everybody in jail, right? You want to just be the, you know, crime dog, as I used to get called when I was a young prosecutor. But after a while, I started to see the same faces coming back over and over and over again. I said, why is this happening? And the conclusion I came to was that we were seeing people who had substance use and mental health issues. But back in the 90s, first of all, there was a horrendous stigma attached to it. Mm-hmm. And the mandate then, as is now in the criminal justice system, is to punish first, rehabilitate second. So why rehabilitate somebody with substance use disorder where you could just punish them, right? And if they keep coming back, you just punish them a bit more until they end up in jail, and well, that should solve the problem, right? Well, it turns out that doesn't solve the problem. And these are not people that we should be treating like criminals. And fast forward to, now, we realize it's a disease. And like any disease, if you don't treat it, it eventually will kill the host, right? And and when there's a disease involved, it's not necessarily, it's hard to say, well, it's a conscious choice that you have the disease, right? So if we know that and it's not a conscious choice and someone has a disease, then we have to treat them as if they had, God forbid, cancer or some other disease, right? And not treat them as if they're a pariah and they're making some conscious choice to make themselves and everybody around them completely miserable. So after I left the state attorney's office in 1999, I did some defense work. I made a lot more money, but I was completely miserable. I got married and divorced. And I tried very hard not to practice law for many years because I was just so disillusioned with the legal profession. After the 2008 crash in 2009, I took what I had left financially because I had been investing my money in real estate and the stock market. And so after the stock market crash, there wasn't really a whole lot left of anything. I had real estate. It all got foreclosed on. My parents went through some very hard times financially. They came very close to losing their home. It was a complete shit show, excuse my French. So in 2009, I took what I had left and I ran off to California for 3 years. I had a cousin who lived out there, and I just went out there and partied my brains out. Now, I was not a substance use or, drug user of any kind, but there are other things that men like, and that's what I spent 3 years having fun with. So I worked out, I had a good time. I took the bar out there twice, failed it twice. Then about 11 years ago, I came back because I was basically tapped out. I had no money left. And I took the bar one more time in California. I actually studied for it in Florida because I couldn't afford to stay in California. I failed it a third time. And then I met somebody that completely changed my life. So there's a guy in Miami. His name is Arjun Robbins. Arjun Robbins runs a company in Miami called How to Manage a Small Law Firm. And what they do is they teach lawyers the business side of the practice, okay? But what they really are is a personal growth company for lawyers. And I met him by chance through a friend of mine that I went to law school with, and I saw this guy give a speech one morning at like 7:30 in Coral Gables. So I had to get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to get there. And after hearing him speak for an hour, I basically begged him for a job. Now, I was destitute, I had no money, so I needed a job anyway, but the chance to work and learn from this guy, I couldn't pass it up. And so I ended up working for the guy down in Miami. I ended up crashing in my brother's place. He had 2 young children. They weren't staying there, so I crashed in one of the kids' little cots for about a year because I couldn't afford a place of my own. In fact, I didn't afford a place of my own for about 5 years after that. I was living at home with my parents. So I spent a year there working for him. I watched how he built that business. I watched other lawyers building their businesses. And after a year there, I said, okay, it's time. I'm going to go open up my own law firm. And I sat down with the owner, and he said, what do you want to do? I said, I know this sounds really strange. I said, but most of my life, I've been surrounded by people who have substance use and some mental illness, my own family, friends. And I said, those are the people I'm going to help. And he said, well, how are you going to do that? I said, I have no idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I had a background in criminal law. I knew from experience people with these issues get arrested, so I figured I could help them that way. And I started to read about the Marchman Act, which is a statute here that, a statute that's unique to Florida. And at the time, there was only 2 lawyers who were touching it. One up here in Palm Beach County, one in Broward County. The guy up here in Palm Beach, and just so we're clear, I had tremendous respect for both of them, and I often refer cases to each one of them if I have a conflict. But the guy up here does divorce work and Marchman Act. The guy down there sues nursing homes and does Marchman Acts. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'm not interested in divorce work. I'm not interested in suing nursing homes. I'm only interested in one thing, helping people with substance use and mental illness. And that's what I set out to do. So I opened up the practice in February of 16 out of the library in Boca. They had free Wi-Fi, and I was broke, so I needed a little bit of a leg up. And I spent the first year hustling, smiling and dialing, going around treatment centers, handing out my business card because I hadn't lived in Florida for a number of years. I hadn't practiced law in more than a few years, and nobody even knew I was here. And nobody in the treatment street knew who the hell I was. I was just some guy handing out a business card. I took some cases, criminal cases, family law cases, just to pay some bills. And that enabled me to get an office, to start the market. And 14 months after I opened up, somebody called me and said, I've got this Marchman Act case. Can I refer it to you? I said, let's go. So that was the beginning. I met my now wife, who is also my law partner, about 2 years in. I had an office, like an executive suite in this building, and so did she. We met at like a networking event. And she started to tell me that she had practiced in Massachusetts for many years before she got divorced and came back to Florida. She'd been practicing doing a lot of guardianship work. And I said, well, tell me about this guardianship thing. Isn't that for elderly people? She said, yeah, this is how it works. And I said, could we use that statute for people who have mental illness? I mean, what we're really talking about is just somebody who lacks capacity to make reasonable decisions for themselves. What difference does it make if they're 85 or 25? She said, I don't know, I suppose, she said, I guess we could. So we started to use guardianship for some of these cases where we needed more control. And I can sort of explain that in a bit. So we had Marchman Act and guardianship going on. And if a criminal case came in, I took it. And then COVID came along and just completely flipped the script. It just completely changed our practice. So a couple of things happened. One was obviously, the courts pretty much shut down for everything except for the cases that we were handling, because our cases all came in as emergencies, right? Because, parents only. My dad used to tell me, if somebody calls you, they're desperate, right? Nobody wants to hire a lawyer, and they definitely don't want to give you any money. So if they're calling you, they're desperate, right? And when I say desperate, I mean, somebody's life is in danger. It's time to act, and we need to move quickly. And that's still the case today when our cases come in. But the courts stayed open for those emergency filings, and they all went onto Zoom, so we didn't have to go anywhere because courts were closed. So instead of just handling cases in maybe Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade, now I can handle cases all over the state, right? As far north as Tallahassee and Jacksonville. And most of the cases have stayed on Zoom, which has been fantastic because we can now help more people. So COVID comes along. It's interesting. I'll back up a second. A year after I opened up, my father passed away. And I had a sibling who had a complete breakdown 2 days after I buried him, and she got Baker Acted. I was there with the police, the paramedics, the whole shebang. It was I've never seen it like this. So when I tell you I know the Baker Act, I know the Baker Act.
Oh, I lost count how many times I've been Baker Acted.
Yeah, I know the
Baker Act.
Yeah, you know it too, right? So during COVID, I started getting calls, people saying, I got a loved one Baker Acted. Can you help? Now, you ask most people about the Baker Act, they'll say, it's only 72 hours, nothing you can do. And my response to that now is, that's bullshit in many ways. But I said, well, because what was happening was people couldn't get in to see their clinicians or their therapists, right? So they started showing up in emergency rooms. They started calling 211. They started showing up at Baker Act receiving facilities. They started showing up at hospital ERs. And they started getting sucked into Florida's mental health system, and they couldn't get out. And so, fast forward now, I have a whole practice. Half of the practice now is just getting people out of Florida's Baker Act. So it's a useful tool, but it's easy to abuse. So now, 2024, there's me and Audra, and we have 6 other members of the team. We are 100% virtual, although I still maintain an office. And we do Marchman Acts, guardianships, and Baker Acts. And sometimes we use the Baker Act for what it's meant to be, which is an emergency resource. I also have a retired cop on staff with a team of investigators, because we get a lot of calls for missing people out in the streets. We got to go find people. We'll help the cops. We'll do it ourselves and then call the cops to come pick the person up. And I have 2 clinicians on staff, a licensed clinical social worker, a forensic psychologist, because since COVID, I mean, the acuity of the cases from a mental health perspective is completely off the charts. And I'm not a clinician, and I don't pretend to be one. And sometimes we need somebody to say, look, here's what's really going on here. These are a couple of treatment options, and let me help you get your insurance approved so you can get it paid. And so it's really grown. But every day is a work in progress, and every day I learn something new from sitting with guys like you or with families or anybody. I mean, just everybody. It's really amazing work. And I have a passion for being a lawyer again and a business owner, because the two go hand in hand.
Right.
So
I have a ton of questions.
Let's go.
They're piling up. I hope I don't forget all of them here.
It's all good.
We'll start off. I want to rewind back to the beginning of when you were talking. Real quick, where's your accent from?
I'm from England originally.
Okay.
Came here in 87 with my family.
Listeners.
It's all right.
I wanted to ask, you touched on being a prosecutor, right? And I'm wondering if you know whether or not through law school, if they are giving more quote unquote education on mental health, substance abuse, things along those lines. Because we talk about this a lot with Dr. T, our medical doctor, who's also on the podcast, one of the co-hosts. And oftentimes we talk about the lack of training in addiction on the medical side. Has it improved? Because you talked about your own shift in thought process where you were like, let's punish them. And, you punish someone enough, they'll get better. Substance abuse, mental health is different. It doesn't work most of the time. Once in a while it might. But
and I got to tell you, I have a client that I represented for about 8 years. He was in federal prison, and they had plenty of drugs there. I mean, so parents shouldn't think, well, if he goes to jail or goes to prison, there's no drugs. There's plenty of drugs in prison and jail. Plenty. Whatever you want.
So going back to the Baker Act and the Marchman Act, for our listeners that may be lost in this, because the Baker Act, well, let's give a description of each, and let's give it from your perspective, starting with the Baker Act.
So the Baker Act, let me tell you what the Baker Act is not, because this is something that people get confused about. It is not a treatment statute. It is not designed to treat anything. It is a statute that allows the state of Florida to take temporary custody of somebody when, as a result of some type of mental illness, they present as an immediate danger to themselves. And the idea is the state takes custody of them, they assess, they stabilize, and they release. That is the mandate. That's what it's supposed to be. So obviously, if you've got somebody in treatment and they're in immediate crisis or having a break and they need a higher level of care, you want to be able to call 911 and say, listen, I need a couple of deputies down here right now. This person needs immediate hospitalization. They're just too acute right now. And maybe they need medication, or whatever it is. They need so you can call 911. The police have authority to Baker Act somebody, and if they need obviously emergency medical care, they go to the hospital, and then they take them to a receiving facility that is licensed by the state of Florida to receive a Baker Act patient. Right. So there are 2 types of Baker Act in Florida. There's the voluntary Baker Act, and there's the involuntary Baker Act. The involuntary is probably what most people are familiar with, which is where they're like, they understand it's a 72-hour hold, right? So that 72 hours typically starts when the person gets to the Baker Act receiving facility. So if they spend a day or two in hospital, those 2 days don't count. Once they get to the Baker Act receiving facility, if they are involuntary, right, and there's 3 ways to begin an involuntary Baker Act, and I'll try not to confuse everybody, but once those 72 hours start, that's the period of assessment and stabilization. Now, if the facility, for some reason, cannot stabilize the person in 72 hours, right, they're either supposed to get voluntary consent, and it'll switch them to voluntary, and that's a whole other problem with the Baker Act, or they have to file a petition with the court and have a hearing and get a court order to extend the detention, potentially up to 6 months.
So that's what happened to me. I actually ended up in a Baker Act, and I think it was like 12 or 13 days, watching everybody else Baker Acted come and go. I never understood why. Well,
that's interesting, because technically speaking, they're only supposed to hold you up to 72 hours. 71 hours and 59 minutes in there. If they're going to keep you, they file their petition for placement. That hearing is supposed to take place within 5 days. So they can go 72 hours, 3 days, plus 5. So the max supposed to be able to keep you for before there's a hearing is 8 days. That doesn't include any stays at the hospital. So,
but aren't we seeing now, like, and we've obviously done our share of Baker Acts here because we have licensed clinicians and they're allowed to Baker Act.
yep.
That would be in, like, if, just to give the listeners an example, if they say they have suicidal ideation or they've cut themselves maybe with something intentionally, cutting, burning themselves, homicidal ideation, just to give some idea.
Yep.
But go ahead, Tom.
And they're in immediate danger. That's the right time to Baker Act somebody.
At least from our experience, I know, like JFK, for instance, they have a Baker Act unit there. So what I think, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but if one of our therapists initiates a Baker Act, oftentimes we drive them to the facility, and they have a Baker Act unit there. I guess I'm confused in terms of where you're saying the hospital and then the Baker Act unit, because it's been at least my experience that they're kind of in the same building, I guess.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. We had a case where mom came home. She found her adult son, I don't know, 20 years old, hanging from the ceiling.
Okay.
Thank God she got him down. She called 911. They took him to the hospital, right? Probably took a day or two to medically clear him, make sure there's nothing wrong. Now, some hospitals have a behavioral health unit, in which case you will then be transferred into their behavioral health unit. Boca Regional, where I live, does not have a behavioral health unit. So if you get Baker Acted there, they will, once you're medically cleared, you'll then be transferred to a behavioral health facility.
A receiving unit.
Could be Fort Lauderdale Behavioral Health. It could be Coral Shores. And I'm just giving you an example of those are the licensed Baker Act receiving that is. And it's not because Boca doesn't want them. It's because they don't have a behavioral health unit which they're licensed to operate. So they don't. If you get Baker Acted there, you're going somewhere else afterwards. You're not staying there.
I thought every hospital had some sort of psych unit. I didn't realize that there's ones that don't.
Well, okay. They may have a mental health unit, but that may not be.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm obviously a Baker Act facility is locked down. They can force medication on you. It's a different type of different animal. So
you're gonna end up either in a facility that has a Baker Act unit that's licensed as a Baker Act unit, and if you do that, well, let's just use JFK as a example because they have a Baker Act unit. I know for certain.
Yep.
Let me take you through this scenario. Let's use that son that was tried hanging himself. He goes to JFK and he's admitted into the emergency room. That's not going to count because he's not in the actual Baker Act unit.
Right. Until his file has been documented that the medical emergency is over, the clock doesn't start to tick.
Okay, and then the 72 hours will start once he gets in the Baker Act. Okay, cool. I didn't know that.
You mentioned. Oh, you have another question?
Yeah, real quick on the Baker Act. It's also been our experience that oftentimes it's not 72 hours. It's like 12, and it's like
or 3.
We've seen that situation where. Somebody says, I'm having suicidal thoughts. I've thought of a plan, so on and so forth. And our licensed clinician initiates the Baker Act. They come, they take the person, and then they're out like 6 or 12 hours later.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I met with another treatment center a couple of days ago, and they said the exact same thing. We can't get the hospitals to keep anybody. The cases that I typically get where somebody ends up in a Baker Act facility are not cases where somebody has come from a treatment center, right? Because normally what happens is if you, for instance, one of your clinicians issues their professional certificate, they call the cops take them over to JFK. JFK knows they're supposed to return that person here for treatment. And if they don't, there's somebody out there that says, hold on a second, we sent this patient over there 4 days ago. What happened to them? In other words, somebody knows they're there, right? But we get the kinds of calls where they're not getting, and it's very rare, but 99.9% of our cases are where either the police got called or somebody made a statement online and the police got called or somebody made a statement to the therapist and now the person ends up in a Baker Act facility, but there's no oversight, meaning nobody knows they're there. So nobody's calling you Baker Act facility and saying, hey, when when are we getting this patient back, right? Once the therapist, if it's a private clinician, executes that professional certificate and the cops take them, they're done. Okay, for them, it's over. And that's not a rub on them. It's just the way it works, right? Or if the police come to your house because somebody's yelled, I'm going to kill myself, once they take you to that Baker receiving facility, again, they're done, right? They're done. So nobody's watching to see what is going on here. And if nobody's watching and you happen to have health insurance, you're going to get stuck there. It's not like a criminal case where if you get arrested, you automatically, as a matter of law, if you can't post bond, you get to see a judge within 24 hours, right, to address the legality of the arrest and what's the reasonable bond so you don't sit in jail waiting till your case gets resolved, right? So think about this is the insanity. You get arrested, you get due process. You get Baker acted, you get nothing. No judge, no right to counsel. They can cut you off from everybody, right? And because nobody knows you're there, they can keep you as long as they want. And guess what's the other rub is? You can't sue them for this stuff anyway. They're an agent of the state of Florida. So who are you going to sue? The state? For what? What are your damages? Right?
I'm glad you brought this up because I was actually talking to a parent the other day about this. They're like, why isn't it easier for me to go to the state and say, my kid has to be in treatment, make them go? And I brought up the point, I forget the name of the movie, but it had Angelina Jolie, where they falsely threw her into a psych unit for an elongated amount of time. And basically the family and people were doing this under false allegation to set it up. So you mentioned the abuse. And like when that was brought up to me, it's important to understand too on the other side of that, like there has to be laws in place to make sure on the other side of it that families or I don't know, an angry ex-wife isn't being vindictive and using this also. So it can be touchy for sure.
Well, look, it's it only takes two things to either get arrested or Baker acted: a finger and someone to point it. That's it. If I pick up the phone right now and I'm like, I'm sitting here with a couple of guys. One of them is threatening to kill himself. He's got a knife in his hand right now. He's going to slit his wrist. You'll have two deputies here within a minute. And I'm pretty sure if I jump up loud enough and swear that I saw it and you were going to kill yourself, they'll take you and Baker act you, right? That's all it takes. Now, am I going to get prosecuted for filing a false police report afterwards? Hopefully I would, right? So I see that a lot. I had a case once where a mother and a daughter were arguing over the phone. Mum was in Minnesota. Mum was in Florida. The daughter was in Minnesota. And they was backwards and forwards in the argument. And the daughter said to the mother, listen, what do you want from me? Should I take a knife? I'll cut my throat. Will that make you happy? The mother said, oh, really? I'm going to fix your ass. Called down here, called the police. The police showed up at the daughter's house and Baker acted her.
Get out.
All right, that's what happened. They dragged her out of the house, cuffed her, stuffed her, and took her to the Baker facility. Fortunately, somebody else, there was a family member there who called me and I got her out. But, I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot. And once the police make a determination there's Baker Act criteria, they're taking you. They shall take you. You're gone.
See, that's interesting because Tom brought up like our frustration as a treatment center. And this has happened multiple times where we've had a client go to our clinician and say, I am suicidal, I have intent, I have a plan. And we'll personally bring them because a lot of times for us, like if we have to call the police, we will. But we like to make it as a human experience as possible. Well, hey, if we feel as a staff safe enough, we'll transport them ourselves because they have a rapport with us, stuff along those lines. If we feel it's safe, make that part very clear. But we'll bring them there, for instance, and they'll bring them in, do an assessment, and like you said, call us back. They're ready to be picked up 2 hours later. And the thing for us is, we're Baker acting them because we're a certain level of care, PHP, IOP at our
and a
program.
certain level of specialty as well, right? I mean,
exactly.
Right.
So we don't. If we're having them Baker acted, that means that we can't guarantee their safety, and more of that comes down to for us that we're not staffed that way. That's not the type of program that we're running where we're 24/7. Our eyes don't come off of you. And that person needs to be in that sort of situation. So we get frustrated because they'll call, and we've had to be like, no, we're not coming to pick them up. What don't you understand about the situation? This person is suicidal with an intent and a plan. So we've seen both sides of it. You know, I've been held personally, and also the other side of it, because I want to throw this out there too as part of it. And this is where the drug addict culture had a negative impact on Baker Acts as well. Because back in, I would say it was probably around the time I was doing this, it was 2002, 2005, maybe somewhere in that window. But it was a well-known thing. If you walked up to, say, Columbia Hospital on 45th Street and you told them you're suicidal, but you're really just hooked on opiates and need a detox, they'll take you in and they'll detox you. So as drug addicts, we kind of learned that too, where we'd say, I'm suicidal, but really you're just looking to be detoxed, and you just kind of stick to your story. So I think that, in my experience, has also played a part somewhat in hospitals sometimes not taking the Baker Act so seriously as needed. There's cases like that too.
Yeah, that's interesting, because actually a substance use disorder is specifically excluded by the Baker Act. That's why we have the Marchman Act, right? Mm-hmm. For primary substance use. So I've seen people who get Baker Acted. I've had 2 cases in the last 10 days where there were, one was 13, one was 17. One was a little girl, one was a little boy. And they were using marijuana. And they became psychotic as a result, right? Go figure. And they got Baker Acted. And so, I mean, obviously my argument to the court was, no, this is a substance use disorder. It's excluded. You got to let them go. And ultimately the facilities did, right? And I said to the family, look, you need to get a handle on this. Just because they have just because somebody, and not all these 2 individuals did, but I've seen cases where the parents say, well, he's got a marijuana card, that's fine. No. It's not fine. Okay, this is licensed drug peddling. So, and that's a whole other conversation we get into, because I see a boatload of that too. Yeah. But so that's why we have the Marchman Act, right? And what's interesting about the Marchman Act, it can actually be initiated the same way as the Baker Act. It's just there's only one county that I am aware of that it will even do that. So, like, you call 911 for a Baker Act, in Gainesville, you can call 911 and get somebody Marchman Acted. And then the hospital will then file the petition for treatment services to keep them. That's the only county I've seen that done. As a general, you've got to run to court and file a petition to get somebody Marchman Acted.
So I think that's a good transition to the Marchman Act. Just to debrief on the Baker Act, you have a voluntary Baker Act or an involuntary. And for us, we've had not quite a lot. I think in the 10 years we've been open, we've probably had to initiate maybe a dozen or 2 dozen right. Baker Acts.
A lot of times we're able to transfer out to a primary mental health facility.
Yeah, but oftentimes going to what Ben says, because we have such a good rapport with the clients, they trust us and stuff like that, we can talk them into doing a voluntary, like, hey, we'll drive you up, we'll take you there, voluntary Baker Act, so on and so forth. And that's always ends up to go pretty well. You were going to say something.
Well, I was saying, like I said, they typically don't go sideways if it's a facility like you guys that are taking them there. But during COVID, people were showing up at these facilities, and they'd sign off not knowing what they were signing. They'd sign, the facility say, well, listen, if you want to get your loved one assessed, I do. Sign here. You just signed a voluntary admission. You just signed an agreement to be Baker Acted. And the difference between a voluntary and an involuntary is that with voluntary, there's no clock ticking, and you could be held indefinitely. And if you revoke consent, they got 24 hours to either let you go or file that petition for placement.
You said something earlier. Sorry to go back on this. I think you dropped a hint on if you have an insurance, they're more likely to keep you longer. And this goes back to the abuse of it. Yep. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the years, I've probably filed over 400 challenges to the Baker Act. And I can only think off the top of my head of 1, maybe 2 cases where there was no health insurance involved. I mean, unfortunately, because nobody knows you're there and it's easy to abuse, the facilities are using this thing like a cash cow, right? They're just billing the insurance. Every pill, every group session that you go to, I mean, every therapy session you go to, they're just billing that. They're billing the hell out of your insurance company. That's what they're doing.
Interesting.
So there's a financial incentive to keep you, which is a shame, because if it's used the way that it's supposed to be used, right, the way you guys use it when there is a true emergency, then it's a very useful tool. Because, I mean, if you can't pick up the phone and call 911, what are you going to do? Call a lawyer, file a petition, wait for a hearing. I mean, someone's going to be dead 10 times over before that happens.
Right.
So we want to be able to, hey, listen, can you take this person now? Right? I mean, so when it's done right, can be a life-saving tool, but it's easily abused because there's no oversight, right? And you can't sue these people unless somebody, God forbid, gets hurt, and I see that every once in a while. I mean, you can file a complaint with DCF, but
Good luck.
Good luck with that.
Essentially, it's loss of due process.
Yeah, it's a loss of due process and civil rights. So if there's a lawyer out there who wants to help me sue some of these facilities and come up with a good cause of action, I'm all ears. But anybody I've ever spoken to says, well, okay, I get it, their rights were violated, but what's the actual damage, right? It's like you get in a car accident, God forbid you get injured, you can sort of monetize the fact that you have 2 herniated discs in your neck, right? And this is what lawyers tell me, there's no monetary damages you can attach to this. So, plus if you're suing the state, there's always a cap. It's like, if you can file a case against the police under state law, there's a $200,000 cap. So if it takes 5 years to litigate the case, there's no financial incentive for most lawyers to take it. So unless you have a federal civil rights violation, right, which gets rid of the cap, then it's really hard to make a case. So
staying on the Baker Act just for 2 more minutes, and then we can transition over to Marchman Act. So with what you do and your practice and your business and stuff, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're more dealing with wrongful Baker Act stuff, I suppose.
That's about half of my practice, is dealing with wrongful Baker Acts. But sometimes we get somebody who was rightfully Baker Acted. What do we do with those cases, right? I mean, you want to do I'm going to go to the judge and say, Judge, I know he tried to hang himself, but, so what? It's just kid stuff. No. I'm going to say to the family, look, we have a real problem here, and we need to address it. Number one, so this never happens again. And 2, because no judge in his or her right mind is going to order them released when 3 days ago you found them hanging from the ceiling. It's just not going to happen. So what's the option? The option is to petition the court to get them moved into a facility where the parents can start making decisions for their loved one, or at least the loved one can start making decisions for themselves if they're an adult. And 2, we can get them the help that they need so that this doesn't happen again, because obviously there's something. If mom comes home and finds her 20-year-old kid hanging from the ceiling, something's going on here, right? Whatever it is, whatever trauma has occurred needs to be addressed so it doesn't continue to get worse, and we don't deal with another Baker Act and another suicide attempt. So in those cases, I will normally say, okay, let's find a place to take them, let's get them approved, and now I'm going to go into court and say, Your Honor, I got a plan B here because we think the family should be the ones making the decision, not the state of Florida, not that Baker Act facility. And 9 times out of 10, I'll get you out. The only time I've ever had an issue, frankly, with these Baker Act cases is when somebody has already been court ordered into the state hospital. I've had a number of cases where we didn't get the phone call until after the fact. Now the person's been court ordered into a state hospital for 6 months. We can get you out, but that is a very tough bell to unring. That's a long road. Most Baker Act cases, I get you out within 1 to 2 days. That's my average. Occasionally, it's the same day. Sometimes it can drag on 4 or 5 days if we have to go to court and litigate the thing. But most times, it's 1 or 2 days. But if you've already been told by a judge you're going to the state hospital for 6 months, and you call me 3 months in, I can get you out. But man, it is one hell of a fight with the state of Florida to get you out, because judges have hundreds of cases on their docket, and they don't want to go back and address one that they've already addressed. So those are tough roads. But again, you got to have someone to put this person, and you have to be able to say to a court, look, we might only be 3 months into this, but they're stable. In fact, they're getting worse where they are right now. We need to get them out and get them into a place of safety so they can start to recover. So it's, I think we were talking before off camera. That's why understanding how all of these things work, Marchman Act, Garnishment, Baker Act, understanding how all 3 of these things interact, because they do, is key and critical to handling one of these cases. Because you may be Marchman Acting somebody, putting them into treatment. You may be petitioning the court for a guardianship so a family can take control. And in the middle of this, as you guys pointed out, somebody gets Baker Acted. Well, if you don't understand how all these things all work together, you're a specialist in the Marchman Act, but you've never handled a Baker Act. What are you supposed to do? Well, I don't know. What should I do with this case? Well, these are all statutes that deal with behavioral health. They all interact, and you have to understand how all 3 of these things work together if you're going to give family viable options. Because it's not just a case where, he smokes too much weed, that's it. Well, back in the 80s when my friends all smoked weed, that might have been fine. Not today. We see in cases with horrific, schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, suicidal ideations, bipolar. I mean, you name it, we're seeing it. Throw a little legalized weed into that, and now you've got an absolute, powder keg waiting to go off. That's why these cases are so complicated. And I'm just talking about from a legal perspective, not the clinical. I leave that to you guys. I'm not a clinician. But I see, some really wacky stuff, especially since COVID.
I've always been under the impression that the Baker Acts, they want you out as soon as possible, and I'm quickly coming to find out that that's not the case.
Not always.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear the other side because, like, we have our position, our roles, and then you're doing.
But you handle
wild
situations that are probably not a lot different, but different than kind of what we're dealing with, because we are oftentimes the referring facility. We're keeping tabs on everything and stuff like that. And, we do a good due diligence at, even if somebody does get out of the Baker Act unit, I would say 9 out of 10 times they're not coming back to us because we're a small facility. We have, you put one bad apple in and it's so if somebody is to the point of getting Baker Acted and then they're released after 72 hours, from our clinical perspective, could they come back into the community and potentially be okay? Possibly. But then we have to factor out risk versus reward here. And then our patients all have health insurance. And so we're able, like Ben said, oftentimes able to say, hey, yes, you got out of the Baker Act unit, but here's what we're going to do instead. You're going to go to this place for a week or two to get stabilized even more, and then we'll bring you back in, and that's kind of how we operate things. But
yeah, I mean, what do you do if somebody gets Baker Acted and they need a higher level of care? I mean,
we'll find them. There's several facilities that we know that are very reputable that do primary mental health, and it's residential, so it's locked down. They do the Q15s. And yeah, generally speaking, because of our rapport with our clients, is like as long as they're not having visual hallucinations, auditory, and just completely outside of our scope, we're able to say to them, "Hey, do the Baker Act. They'll stabilize you. During that time, we'll line up primary mental health for you. They'll generally keep you 2 weeks to 30 days." Complete that. We know that whether it's medications that got you stabilized, whatever the case may be, complete that. We'll be in contact with them. They'll communicate with our clinical director, vice versa. And then, if appropriate, we'll get you back here, and then we'll keep the progress moving forward.
And you know what? That's beautiful, because we don't want the person out in the street.
Mm-hmm.
Where I sort of come in is when they do the Baker Act and they're like, nah, I'm not coming back. I'm done. I'm not going there. I'm not going here. Right, so now the family steps in and says, listen, how do we get them in there? Well, if they're not going to go voluntarily, then somebody has to make that decision for them. It's interesting you were talking about, forcing them into treatment. And I speak to so many parents over the years, I mean, just from all over the country, and they're like, well, sometimes they'll say, I don't want to force my loved one into treatment. I get it. I don't like being forced to do anything either. Mm-hmm. I'm not asking you to force them. I'm asking you to make the decision for them that they can't make, because if they could, we wouldn't be talking. So if you're not going to make the decision to save them, who is? You want the state to do it for you? Okay, that's fine. But I can't tell you you're going to get a great result with that. Or don't do anything. What do you think is going to happen? How do you think this picture looks in 6 months?
Yeah.
So is that when it transitions more into a Marchman Act?
Or even a guardianship?
Okay, so let's go into guardianship.
Okay.
And, man,
I have a big question when we get to the Marchman Act. Remind me.
Listen, I'm happy to stick around and chat with you guys.
There's one example, and you could probably read my mind on this one with the Marchman Act that I'd like to touch on to get his insight.
Part of me is wondering if we should break this up into separate episodes.
Let's keep rolling.
It's up to you. Listen, I'm having fun with you guys.
No, I'm not saying leave. I'm saying, no, well, let's cover the guardianship. And then if anything, we can pause for 5 minutes, get a drink, and then record the other one on Marchman Act. But let's just see. Let's go into guardianship. I don't even know what that is.
Okay, so think about. You guys ever watch that movie Back to the Future? I'm
Oh
aging
yeah,
myself.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So the guardianship is the DeLorean time machine. That's what guardianship is. It allows you to get into this vehicle, a legal vehicle, and go back in time, right? Because once you're 18 and over, you get to make your own decisions. You're considered an adult, right? You can get married, you can buy a house, you can buy a car, right? You could do whatever you want, right? You're free to travel, live with who you want to live, right? You're an adult. The problem is, if you're somebody who has mental illness or substance use, you may not be making what we would, as adults, consider objectively rational, right? Refusing to go to treatment when you have a long history is not rational, right? Burning through your dough to buy drugs or hanging out with people you shouldn't be spending time with, whatever it happens to be, is not rational. So we use this legal vehicle of guardianship to go back into time when the parents or anybody else who cares to be the guardian had the legal authority to make decisions for you, right? You're 12 years old or 14 years old. You can't legally get married, not in Florida anyway, right? You can't go out and buy a car because you can't sign that lease. As a matter of law, you don't have the capacity to enter into a contract. Get to 18, you can go buy that Lambo if you want to, right? So the guardianship turns the clock back. And now the parents, because that's typically who becomes the guardians, can now start making decisions for you. I know you don't want to go to treatment, but you're going. And I need access to your medical records so I can see what's going on here. I need to restrict your ability to travel because I don't want you getting on a plane flying to Mexico. And I've seen that happen too. And I got them back, right? I don't want you hanging out with these people because they're a bad influence on you. I don't want you living over there because that's where all the drug houses are located, right? You're not getting married, and I'm going to control your money, and you're not buying that Lambo, right? And if you don't, then I guess we're going to have a chat with the judge about, what are the consequences of not following the instructions of the guardian, because you simply can't make decisions that are good for you, right? And so we use guardianship for that, and it's very broad in application, meaning there are 12 rights that the court can basically suspend and give the guardian the authority to make, and that's what guardianship does.
You said the 12 rights.
You don't ask me to name them all?
Well,
I'll have to think about that. My wife's the expert on
Yeah, if you
guardianship.
put me on the spot with something like
No,
that,
it's
I'll go
fine.
through them all. I'll do the best I can remember, but typically it's like the right to travel, to determine where you live, the right to contract, the right to marry, control your finances, make medical decisions. I think that's 7 or 8. Those types of things.
It's like typical, like almost any kind of relatively large decision that an adult would make.
Correct.
On a daily basis.
How's that different from Marchman Act then?
Okay, that's a great question. So the Marchman Act is a statute. First of all, it's for primary substance use, right? There has to be substance use as primary. And you guys know sometimes it's chicken or egg, right? What came first? Well, primary substance use. And it enables us to get a court order that says, Ben, you will go to treatment for up to 90 days. And if you don't, well, I guess we're going to see the judge. Now, we put Ben into treatment, and insurance covers it, or parents spend all this money on treatment, and mom and dad call up treatment center and they say, oh, how's Ben doing? I'm sorry, we cannot confirm or deny that Ben's here. What do you mean? I was in court. I saw you guys take him to treatment, and I just gave you a check for $10,000. I know, but he won't sign a release of information. He's really pissed at you for putting him into treatment, and he doesn't want to talk to you, and I'm sorry, we cannot confirm or deny. Click. The parents are like, hold on a second, what's going on here? So the Marchman Act is a great tool, but it's very narrow, meaning it gives a very small form of relief. It's a court order that says Ben's going to treatment for up to 90 days. That's it. It doesn't allow the parents to control everything. But some parents are like, listen, I don't want to be the guardian. I just want to get him into treatment, and I want him to get well. That's great. Fantastic, right? The other thing that's cool about Marchman Act is that because it's two parts, assessment and treatment, that assessment period can be initiated on an emergency ex parte basis, meaning I file my petition, Ben doesn't know about it until Ben gets a knock at the door, and my private investigator and 2 cops are there to take him to a facility that's going to hold him for, well, the typical court order is good for 5 days, but we can extend it. But basically they're going to detain him as if it was a Baker Act, but now it's for primary substance use. And if Ben doesn't do the assessment or he leaves, well, we're going back to see a judge. So it can be done really quickly. And I think we maybe talked about off camera where I think I filed this case last night. I don't know, about 9 o'clock. By 9:10 it was accepted, and by 9:53 I had a court order. This is a kid who's out in the street somewhere here, but we'll find him. But so it can be done really quick. So it may be that we need something that's really fast, like Marchman Act, but it may be also that we need a lot of control. So while you're sitting in the detox or wherever you happen to be, I'm going to run to the court, try and petition the court for what's known as an emergency temporary guardianship. So I can file guardianship on an emergency basis too, but it requires a hearing, which typically takes place within 24 to 72 hours. So it's not as quick as Marchman. But I'm going to need a primary substance use disorder to be able to prove that, to be able to get that first Marchman Act order. So sometimes we've got these two things going on at the same time, but Marchman is very quick, but like Baker Act, it's emergency, I need the court order right now. Guardianship takes just a little bit longer depending on how we file it.
So you can, if I understood you correctly, say I'm Ben's brother. I call you up, Mark. Ben is he's throwing his life away. He's shooting heroin. He's openly using fentanyl. He's hanging out in dope houses. He's just everything, blah, blah, blah. What can I do to get him into treatment? Mark, I've heard about this thing called a Marchman Act. Is this something that I could do? Like, how would you handle that situation?
Well, so as long as we can prove all that, right?
I can prove it. I got him on Snapchat.
Beautiful. Okay. So we go through what I call triage in the case. We talk about the history of the case, how long it's been going on for, what you've tried in terms of treatment, what hasn't worked, why hasn't it worked, how long have they stayed in treatment, how long has it been before they relapse, all of those things, because we really need all those things because we're now asking the court for extraordinary relief. We're asking the court to send the cops to go pick him up, and he's not getting any due process. None. Not at this point anyway. He will do later, but not right now. And so, yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like Ben needs to go to treatment, but the first part is to get him assessed, because the statute says that unless a qualified professional like a licensed clinical social worker, an MD, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, can give the court an opinion that he needs treatment, right? So that I need him to be assessed so we can get that opinion in front of the court. The other thing is the Marchman Act, like Baker Act, is confidential and it's considered part of his medical records. So if it's confidential and it's, how do I get it? Well, I need a court order to get around his HIPAA and federal and Florida law to get around his privilege, his medical privilege. Now I'm entitled to see that assessment, even though it's part of his medical records, because I have a court order that says to the facility, take Ben, do an assessment, give it to the lawyer, give it to the judge, right? Give it to the clerk of court so that we know what's going on here. So then I can put the person to the assessment, they come to court, and if Ben is not going to agree to go to treatment under a court order, well, then I guess, as his brother, you're going to testify and tell the judge what's going on, and then I'm going to put the qualified professional on to testify and tell the judge why he meets criteria and that he needs to go to treatment for up to 90 days because he's got a long-standing substance use disorder. He's refusing to go to treatment. He cannot appreciate the fact that he needs services, and if we don't do it, well, something terrible is going to happen to him.
And what if Ben doesn't? He goes through all this process, goes in front of the judge, and give him the double barrel middle finger and says, I ain't doing any of it.
Well, the judge is going to say, well, I'll tell you what, Ben, I'm going to give you a choice because I'm ordering you into treatment. If you're not going to do it, then my option is to throw you in the county jail for the next 5 months and 29 days. I can tell you the food's going to definitely be better in treatment. Which one do you choose? And in 9 years of doing this, we just recently had the very first person go into custody for a little bit. I mean, unless the food is horrendous here, and I'm sure it's not.
No, you just saw what we were eating.
I did. I'd much rather eat here, right? I'm eating here. And so most people are going to say, look, I'll go to treatment.
Something else you said, though, that was interesting, and I want to double back on it. You said you need an assessment. Okay, if I'm Ben's brother, and I know that Ben's out ripping and roaring, and maybe he's never been to treatment before. We've done... And I'm using these as examples because these are calls that we get from families. Never been to treatment before. We've tried, at this point, 3, 4, 5, 6 interventions. Every time we do an intervention, he runs off. He's overdosed, 7 times, so on and so forth. We've tried throwing him a lifeline so many times, Mark. He's just not. He's never I feel like we're at this stage now where he needs to be forced into treatment, and we don't know how to force him in. But you said through a Marchman Act, we need an assessment. I don't think I'm going to get him to be able to even do an assessment. What do we do at that point?
Well, so the first part of the Marchman Act is that period of assessment. So when I get that court order to get him picked up, that order is for him to be assessed as well.
Okay, so I think that's where I wasn't tracking.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
Yes.
you can get him picked up, and you can kind of force him to do the assessment.
Correct.
Makes sense. Okay, that's where I was getting hemmed up.
Have you ever seen the assessment come back like negative? No substance abuse, no mental health?
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. So that, there are parts of Florida that are better at handling the kinds of cases that we'll work on than others. Palm Beach is a great place to file a Marchman Act or a guardianship. Broward's a pretty good place. Hillsborough County, Orange County. Some counties are really great. There are other counties that I deal with, Pasco, Pinellas, Lee, where I've had clerks say, I don't know what this is. Or, wow, you're the first lawyers ever filed one of these. Yeah, well, that's why no one's going to treatment in your county, because nobody's filing these things, and if they do them wrong. We also, one of the benefits of doing it down here is you can use a private receiving center, like a private detox, to do the assessment for you. You go to one of these smaller counties, their Baker Act facilities are also licensed as Marchman Act facilities, so you get taken to a locked up facility, which is great if you're a runner, but now I can't get my assessment. I need my assessment. I can't get anybody on the phone. They don't give me the assessment. They haven't done the assessment. They haven't filed it with the court. We then file for a treatment services hearing. The person who did the assessment doesn't show up. It can be very frustrating to deal with some of these smaller counties. I recently the clinical director in one of these facilities. I filed a contempt motion against her for not giving me the assessment. They handed it over eventually, but I got the parents calling, when are we getting a hearing? When are we getting a hearing? They're threatening to let my son go. And I feel terrible. But I'm somewhat constrained, and it's because these smaller counties just don't know what they're doing, and it's frustrating for us. And I will tell a family, look, filing a Marchman Act in this particular county is going to be a very tough road for us. I'm just letting you know that. We might want to consider something else, like a guardianship, because then I can go right into court and get a hearing in front of a circuit court judge, and I can probably get an emergency temporary guardianship. I don't need an assessment. I just need you to come into court and tell the judge what's going on here. But you got to be prepared to serve as the guardian. Some families don't want to do that. Okay, well, would he like a nice vacation down in Boca for a long weekend? Because if you can get him down here, I'll file down here and I'll pick his ass up on a Friday or a Saturday, and we'll get him here. And I've been known to do that. Listen, I'm a sneaky bastard, but you want me to save your kid? Yeah, I don't mind being a sneaky bastard. Mm-hmm. That's what I do. I save people's loved ones. And if being a sneaky bastard's part of it, I'm up for that.
So somebody would fly in from out of state?
Yeah. Yeah, we get a lot of those. In fact, I would say that most of our calls come from out of state. I've had calls. God, we had a case recently. It was a guardianship case where we brought them in from Hawaii. That was a whole other adventure. I've had a couple of international clients, and they say, my loved one is either here, they're coming here, or I need to get them there, right? And so once their feet touch the ground in Florida, now I have jurisdiction over them. It doesn't matter if they're a resident or if they're even a citizen. I can Marchman Act them, and I can file for guardianship over them too. And they can get Baker Acted. I've seen that. I've seen people come here on vacation, get Baker Acted. Crazy. Welcome to Florida. I'm never coming to Florida again.
Oh,
I get it.
that's funny.
I didn't know that. So if we get, I'm not saying that we would do this, but maybe we would, Ben. Who knows? You get Mama Bear calling saying that my son is, being an absolute dipshit, and I've tried getting him to go to treatment up here, blah, blah, blah. He's not. And if I tell him he's going to Florida to go to treatment, he's not going to, yada, yada, yada. We could always tell Mom, hey, you're going to the beach. You're going to go, on a little vacation. And then when they get here, we call up Mark. Hey, Mark, they're here. And you and your, cronies go over there and scoop them up.
We go over there and scoop them up, right?
Yeah.
So either they come here voluntarily, or maybe the parents do an intervention up there, and that gets them here. And interventions are great. Great for getting people into treatment, but I'm going to be the one who's going to keep them here in treatment. Or maybe mom and dad file some kind of cause of action in their home state. So we only have Marchman Act here in Florida, but most states, if not all of them, have a guardianship statute. Okay, so you're in New Jersey. File for a guardianship up there. Get your guardianship. Now mom and dad have the authority to bring them down here. You bring them down here, I'll run to court in Florida, and I will domesticate, get the Florida court to recognize your New Jersey guardianship. And now if they become non-compliant or they try to leave, I can run to court in Florida. I don't have to go to court in New Jersey. So there's ways to get people down here.
Wow.
I got a question I want to ask. It's kind of in a different it's related to the Marchman Act. Is there I'll elaborate. Let me ask this first, though. Is there a time limit on how long a family can hold a Marchman Act?
I know exactly what you're referring to. I was going to ask the same thing.
Okay, so it's chunks of 90 days. So let's say the court says, Ben, you're going to treatment up to 90 days. So the statute says up to, not for. That gives the treatment center some discretion, right? Mm-hmm. How long they keep them and the level of care, residential, PHP, IOP. It's just a treatment order. How you administer that treatment and for how long, that's up to the treatment center, right? But we get to day 79 and Ben's parents call me and they say, we spoke to the treatment center, he's not doing so good. Or the treatment center calls me and says, Ben's doing great, but he needs longer. I can petition the court for another 90 days. So
increments.
Yeah, I actually had a kid that came here from Arkansas. It was down in Broward. I got a call from this criminal defense lawyer in Arkansas. He said, hey, I'm representing this young man. He's in his late 20s. He has been in and out of prison for 5 years. And every time he goes in, the judge gives him more time because he commits a more serious crime. And I read about this thing called the Marchman Act. He's like, if I can get him from Arkansas to Florida, will you Marchman Act him for me? I said, sure. So what we did was the criminal lawyer in Arkansas got the judge to release the kid out of prison and under the condition that he would come here and agree to be Marchman Acted. I had this kid under a Marchman Act for close to 2 years. Every 90 days, I went back into court and I filed my petition for extension, and I had the judge extend it. And he knew if he didn't agree to it, he was going right back to prison in Arkansas. After 2 years, I think they figured out, okay, let's see how he can function on his own. So, I mean, it can go for a period of time. That's the longest I've ever seen. But in our office, we typically do them for about 6 months. We normally do one initial court order, and then we'll file for an extension. Because, I mean, as a general rule, and we tell this to families, we got to get somebody in recovery for a year. Because we just know from experience, if you can do a year, there's a good chance they'll develop the skills they need to maintain lifelong recovery. That doesn't mean you got to hire me for a year. It doesn't necessarily mean treatment for a year, but it probably means at least 6 months of treatment, followed by, 12 steps, IOP, getting a sponsor, going to AA, all of those things that you're going to need to get to 1 year. And then obviously you hope at the 1 year period, it's like you and I, we go to the gym. It's just what we do. It's just part of I get up in the morning, I have a cup of coffee, I check my emails, and I go to the gym for 45 minutes or whatever it is. That's what I do Monday through Friday. It's just what I do. It's part of my lifestyle. And if I stop doing it, I get fat. So, and I have a new wife, and I don't want to get fat. But the point is, we have to give these people the skill set so that they can maintain lifelong recovery. And that takes time. It takes time for them to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, and it also takes time for the family to heal. Because through all of this craziness that's been going on for years and years and years, the family has become, it's a family disease, right? We talk about this in what we do. But the family has become so used to this, they don't know any other way of living other than in the craziness of this world that they've become accustomed to. And so they need time too. They need therapy. They need counseling. They need help. They need time to heal. And if we don't give the family that time, then everything just goes to shit.
Yeah.
I was initially, thank you for touching on all that. It kind of gives a really good picture of the strengths of the Marchman Act, so to speak. You mentioned earlier, when we were talking about the Baker Act, we were talking about the pros and the cons, specifically the abuse of it. And I've only seen this once, and this is my personal/professional opinion. Obviously I'm not an attorney, but I've seen a case where an individual was Marchman Acted, And in my professional opinion, it was the parents being abusive. Locked them into this Marchman Act, and through conversations with this parent, the sinister laugh that came along with the I have control, I can make them do whatever I want, and if not, he thinks he's going to jail, but I'll never actually let him go to jail. But just as long as he thinks he is, when I say jump, he'll jump. When I say how high, he'll say how high. I'm like, and I'm sitting back like, oh my goodness, this individual.
He was stripped of his rights.
It was atrocious. I've never seen anything like it. It was one case. I'm sure this is probably an extreme case, but I was just blown away that I would argue this individual would have healed had he just been separated from his family. The family was literally the problem. Have you ever seen anything like that?
I have actually. And I'll tell you, I'm a firm believer that the work that we do, Marchman Act and guardianship, and even the Baker Act sometimes, it's supposed to be a shield, not a sword, right? We're trying to help somebody, not punish them, right? I leave that up to the criminal justice to punish people. My job is to help you to save your loved one. Now, we have had a couple of instances where we've had to either decline representation or I fired the client. We had one where I had a woman, it was a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. She called me and says, my boyfriend's a serious alcoholic. She was probably in her 60s and he was in his 40s. Anyway, long story short, I had him picked up. He went to treatment for, I think, about 90 days. And she called me and said, I want you to extend the Marchman Act. I said, okay, let me talk to the treatment center to find out what's going on. I spoke to the head clinician there and she said, while he was in treatment and he got sober, he met somebody else, somebody his own age, and he told the older girlfriend, he's done. I said, really? I said, she wants to extend this thing. She's like, no, we're not signing off on that. He doesn't need more than 90 days. He's going to do the aftercare. He's going to do AA. He's going to get a sponsor. He has a sponsor. I don't think he meets criteria. I told the client, I said, I'm sorry. I spoke to a treatment center. He doesn't meet criteria. I can't file this thing for you. If you don't file this thing for me, I'm going to file a bar complaint against you. I said, oh, really? So I filed the motion to withdraw. I fired the client. I went in front of a judge because I have to get permission to withdraw from a case, and she got up there and she said, Mr. Astor this, Mr. Astor that. And the judge looked at her and says, Miss So-and-so, it sounds like you need a new lawyer. She said, I do. He said, Mr. Astor, your motion is granted. You're off the case. Have a nice day. But I'm like, no, I told her, I said, I'm not looking here. This is not for you to get vindictive against him. We had another set of parents that hired us, and we Marchman Acted their son. And during this process, we got wind of the fact that what was really going on was there was an allegation made that the father had slept with his son's girlfriend. That's why the kid was using, amongst other things, but we found that out. And the father became very adversarial. My wife said to him, on a conversation, because the father was being so, ridiculous, so rude, disrespectful. My wife said to him, listen, I'm just going to tell you straight. I think you're the problem. I think the reason your son is traumatized is because you're the problem. It's the way you've acted. It's the way you treat him. And I'm sorry. We're not going to continue to represent you. We're not going to force him into treatment. If you want this done, find another lawyer. And I told my wife, file a motion to withdraw and get rid of him. This is not what we do. We're here to help people. And if families call us and they're looking to stick it to somebody, find another lawyer. I'm not taking your case or your money, and don't call me ever again. I don't want to hear it. That's not what we do. That's not my mission. That's why I didn't practice for years.
I love hearing that. That's integrity, because if I speak honestly, the time that I saw this example that I shared, that's what the decision we came to. We're no longer treating this individual, and it was because of the family, not because of the client. And if I'm honest with you, in this situation, I was saying, because if I'm not mistaken, the Marchman Act went on for a year and a half. We were about a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years into it.
Yeah.
By the time we got the case, and I never met the attorney, but I had a resentment against the attorney. Like, how are you not seeing this after interacting with the family for this long? Do you not know? Are you not educated on what you're doing? What's the case here? Are you just not ethical? What is going on here? I'm like, they were part of the problem. And what I'm thinking to myself, being the pessimist, like, oh, they're just collecting the check. The family's going to write me a check to be their Marchman Act attorney and represent them. And I felt a certain way about it, to be honest. But so hearing you with that level of integrity is very refreshing.
Yeah, we got to be careful. I mean, there was a time, it's funny, I was telling somebody the other day, when I first started, I had no money. I would cry because the phone didn't ring. Now the phone rings off the hook, and I'm like, God, stop the phone ringing. I can't get your work done. So there's lots of people that need help, and it's only getting worse. But yeah, so we're blessed that we can be very, very picky about who we work with. I'm just not going to work with any. To quote my mentor, I have a no arseholes policy.
Nice.
I'm not going to tolerate somebody who calls up and is rude to the staff, rude to me, and frankly is just using it to stick it to somebody. And I'm just not going to take you as a client. I don't want you. Goodbye. Find somebody else. There's too many people that need help.
We've done that with families. In particular, what we find a lot of times is like it's more the families that self-pay and not through insurance. And there's been times when Tom and I have called the families back and when we're not dealing with you. Come pick up your kid. Here's your money back. And they're like, wait. Change a tune real quick.
Yep.
Like, it's...
Yeah, we've had to put families on, like, behavioral contracts.
Yep.
Like, if you want us to continue to treat your loved one, you're going to agree to not call, not email, not give us any of your input. Like, you've entrusted us to do a job, and if you feel like you can do it better, well, then just come pick your kid up.
These are rare cases, but sometimes we have to...
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a fine line between needy, and I get that. Mm-hmm. Some people need more hand-holding than others, and, I mean, that's one of the things, I now have a team, and I have somebody who's a case manager, and if they, so that they're there to hold the hand, because I get it. That we're used to dealing with this stuff, but for a family who's never dealt with a court system or with treatment, it's frightening, and I get it. But you can be needy, and I'm there for you, but I'm not going to deal with abuse, because I have other families that also need us, and I got to treat them with the same respect that I'm going to treat you, but you also have to reciprocate. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And, as we've gotten busier, I've had to be, frankly, a little more careful with my own mental health because, this work is, if you're somebody like me, I give off my energy. I'm going to get home from this, I'll be exhausted because I'm giving of my energy, right? I'll have to have a little quiet time to regenerate. But so I'm giving energy all day long to clients and whatever else I'm doing.
It seems like you love what you do and you're passionate.
I do. I have a passion for it. I have a passion for what we do, but I have a passion for building the business because I know if I can build it, I can help more people. And as we get a little bigger, I start to give a little bit away for free, right? We've started doing a little, some more pro bono work. And I love that because, frankly, not everybody can afford treatment and can afford a lawyer. So if I can give back that way, I'm going to. It's great. How can you feel bad about doing that?
You kind of touched on it again. This is a little different direction, but in the very beginning when we first started talking, you talked about personal growth. Mm-hmm. And you talked about how you became an attorney, but then you found a mentor in Miami, if I'm not mistaken, that was about building a small practice.
So his underlying philosophy is personal growth has to precede financial growth. Right?
Personal growth has to precede. Yes. So one of the things, and I experienced this too, so I just kind of related when you talked about it, because I remember when we were fresh into this, Tom, like back even before Rock, and in particular, it was the place before that I had opened with the lady.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, I love helping clients. I'm really good at it. I'm ethical. I have integrity. We're gonna reshape and reform substance abuse in Palm Beach County. And then I find out there's a business side, and I have no idea what I'm doing.
Neither did I, because they don't teach us that stuff in law school, which is, so we actually belong to that coaching program because we're growing our business. And when you grow a business, you have to build a team so you can help more people, right? But that means you need systems and policies and procedures, because otherwise you just have chaos. And if you have chaos in your business, you can't help anybody. So
yeah, I wanted to bring that up because I could totally relate to that, where I'll tell therapists this a lot, just through my experience of working in the field for the last, 11 years now. I've seen a lot of therapists in particular like, oh, I want to do this, but I'm actually thinking about opening a private practice. And the thing that I say to him is, yes, you're a great therapist, but have you thought through how you're going to run your own business? Now you're responsible for your own marketing. Now you're responsible for collecting payment and all. And they always sit back and all they look at is, I'm a great therapist, but there's so much more to it. Because I know some phenomenal people in the recovery field that when surrounded by drug addicts, alcoholics, have a phenomenal message, but they go to open up a treatment center and it is horrifying. And it's not because they're not good people. They just based it all off of their message and their ability to help people on a personal level versus a facility level. And it sounds like you kind of had the same experience.
I did.
But yeah.
I did. And so, I mean, every day I work on my business. In fact, I enjoy that probably more than practicing law. And, I still take clients just because we just, we're growing and, I can't throw everything on my wife and Lewis, who's our associate. So, I probably have 4 or 5 cases on my own pending at any one time. But I enjoy the business development. I enjoy sharing the message. This is why I was so excited to come talk to you guys. But, that's a fun part of it. But people don't realize, you got to be able to I got to get client number 1 through the door.
Yep.
These lights don't get paid for on their own,
Yeah, I always had that. If you build it, they will come, and no one came.
Well, yeah, if nobody knows about it, they ain't coming.
Yeah.
I think, too, like, I want to give Tom a compliment. We'll do this once in a while, make his head a little bigger. Yeah. But, like, I think this is why we work good together, because he's so good at, like, the business side of this. Like, I'm always, like, I'm the empath. I'm always with the clients, but, like, if it wasn't for Tom, I feel like my strengths wouldn't be utilized. I wouldn't be able to utilize them to their ability but he's literally like paving the way so that I can use my strengths, if that makes sense.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it goes both ways though, because, my strengths are, all that, but like, I don't, Mark, so I don't interact with the clients near as much as what Ben does. Like I sit up here. At any given time you walk into this office, you're going to see me pinned behind this computer because that's what I enjoy. It's kind of like, I love being with the clients and interacting with them, but it doesn't fuel me like it does Ben, So it's kind of like, we balance off each other.
Yeah, we do balance well.
But we're kind of, in terms of the podcast in and of itself, we have some things in the pipeline that I was sharing with you before we started. And that's kind of like, for years and years, we've just, we come in, press record what we can, edit it down, put it out. And we've been doing that now for the last 7 years. And we're just now getting to the point where we're getting ready to launch, some stuff to generate a little bit of revenue, because now we're, oftentimes people are like, oh, well, how much money are you spending on your podcast? And although we are spending a relatively significant amount of money, I mean, just in terms of equipment in here, there's well over 10 grand. You got just the time, and time is money in this situation, and like, so we're in a position now where we're going to start, asking people really to support us financially. And through that, we're going to be able to offer them some cool stuff. And, I love talking to people on the phone, but like you said in the beginning, you were waiting for the phone to ring and now the phone won't stop ringing. And that's, I'm not at that point yet, but like there's emails that we get that I can't get to, because there's a lot of other stuff that, I got to attend. I don't know. So it's all a work in progress.
We're all a work in progress.
Yeah.
All of us.
But this conversation was great.
No, I really enjoyed this. This is one of those ones for me where, generally speaking, when we sit down with like someone in recovery, I, for the most part, ask a question. I want to hear what their experience is, but I pretty much have kind of heard it all, if you will, in some way, shape, or form. But like in this case with you, there was really some questions I had that got clarified, and I got some new education today. And I really enjoy that for myself, selfishly. Like the Marchman Act, Baker Act, some of those questions I asked, I've been wondering for a long time. And to have you here to be able to share that stuff.
I was grateful that,
And I think too that there could be some, and we could talk more about this off the recording, but there might be some collaborating that we can do.
I love it.
In some capacity, because we get obviously a ton of families, a ton of loved ones that reach out that are, kind of unsure as to what to do. And we're not near as educated in terms of Marchman Acts and stuff like that, guardianship, Baker Acts as you are. I think there could be something here.
I'll give you an example, actually. Just kind of poking fun at myself. We had a Marchman Act case here, and I pissed off the attorney because I wasn't like completely educated on basically the confidentiality stuff when the attorney's involved with the Marchman Act. And I was like a little hesitant to share some of the information. And this dude laid into me. And remember, I reached out to Katie, who's our quality assurance, and she kind of like backed up what the attorney was saying. I was like, oh, crap, my bad. Like, I don't want to piss people off. But in my mind, I was like, what am I supposed to be doing as far as a client? So again, like having resources like you to be able to go to and get clarification on this stuff, because you don't know what you don't know. And I ended up having to apologize to the guy. I was like, so, my bad, dude, you were right, so it's
that's funny.
There's just always so much to learn in this field. You're never done learning.
That's why, well, at least from my perspective, that's why they call it the practice of law.
Right.
I mean, I learn something every day. I learn something from you guys today. I learn something from a parent that calls me. I might learn something from the other lawyer or a judge or a clinician, whoever it is. I mean, we're constantly learning, and our space is constantly evolving. So we're constantly having to learn to at least keep up with just these cases that just constantly are morphing and changing. And I mean, these cases, I always tell the family, the one thing that's predictable about these types of cases and these types of clients is they're completely unpredictable. I can tell you that for sure. I don't know if your loved one's going to have a good day, a good morning, or a good hour. I just don't know, because they may be good from 9 to 10 and be terrible from 10 to 12. That's what you're dealing with. Or they have a good Monday and a lousy Tuesday. That's part of recovery. They might even relapse. That's part of recovery. Yeah. I hope that doesn't happen, but it can happen, and it does happen.
Yeah.
But we keep moving forward.
Yeah, parents, loved ones, they tend to want black and white answers. And what I tell them is the reason that we're professionals is because there are no black and white answers. What we're good at is readjusting, addressing the situation as it's currently happened, changing the direction of the sales, and going. We have to know how to respond to situations. That's what makes us professionals, experts in this. Not that there's black and white answers.
There isn't. I mean, and cases go. We've had cases where we started in one county and we ended up in another county. I had one case where the person was they were a resident of Florida and they'd been detained under Georgia's equivalent of the Baker Act. This was something new for us. I wasn't sure we could pull this one off. So we filed for guardianship down here, and I got the facility in Georgia to actually accept the Florida guardianship. And I said, we have guardianship, and I want him. And they said, okay, you can have him. So I sent somebody up there. We got him transported, got him into treatment back down here. But I said, okay, worst case scenario, I'll find a lawyer in Georgia. I'll get my Florida guardianship. I'll get it domesticated up there, and then I'll be like, now I have a Georgia guardianship. I want him. So I mean, we're constantly trying to think outside of the box. Mm-hmm. How do we do things differently? We had a case the other day where I think we had somebody who, we filed on one of these smaller counties. The receiving facility didn't even hold them for a couple of days. I didn't get a chance to get into court onto the treatment services part of the Marchman Act, and the mother's frantic. I said, what we're going to do? I'm going to file an emergency petition under the Baker Act. I'll get myself a pickup order, and I'll get the cops to grab him. And that's what we did. But again, you have to know how all these things work. Otherwise, you tell the parents, sorry, I did the Marchman Act. It didn't work. You're screwed. No. Find a solution, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a law of the universe. If there's a problem, there's always a solution. If there's left, there's right. If there's up, there's down. If there's in, there's out. That's how the universe works. So if there's a problem and there's kids on the street, find the solution. It's there. And so that's what we're good at doing. And so it's just like anything. We're always trying to figure out if I got a kid on the street, how do I get him? How do I pick him up and get him into a safe place so I don't have to get that call, which every once in a while I get from a crying mother whose kid overdosed and died. I don't want that call. I got one last year and 3 the year before. I don't like getting that call. It's gut-wrenching. And you feel like you say, could I have done something different to save this person? Sometimes you can, more often not that you can't, right? It just is what it is. So we're always trying to figure out things. And it's frustrating. And I said to my wife the other day, I said, this is exhausting. She said, why? I said, sometimes we're fighting with the clients, we're fighting with the judge, I'm fighting with the clerk, I'm fighting with the other lawyer, and I'm just trying to save somebody here.
Yeah.
You know, and when I say I'm fighting with the parents, it's not that they're like, get me into court now, right? And I want to get you into court now, but I got a judge who's got 1,000 cases on his docket, and they're just not going to move any quicker than they're going to move. And I just physically can't get him. You know, well, he's going to, he'll flee. I get it. If he does, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We'll deal with it. We'll figure out a solution. So, that's why I've had to be very protective of my own mental health because, it's exhausting and we want to give personal service and we want to hold your hand. But, as I was telling an interventionist the other day who was like, I don't understand why we can't get him into treatment now. Well, there's a process and I'm a lawyer and I got to follow it. Well, go get him picked up. Oh, I need a court order for that, which is fine. I'll get the court order, but it's going to take a little time because the judge I have to draft the petition, I have to file it, he has to get through the clerk, it has to get reviewed, and I have to get my order, and then we have to go execute it. So, it's a labor of love and patience, and man, I'm just blessed I could share my vision with you guys.
That's great. That was awesome.
Yeah,
so,
I've had fun with this.
We're going to have you back on for sure. For sure.
Maybe we could talk about something else. Not that I won't talk about this stuff, but I want to hear about I can interview you guys.
You should have a podcast.
Well,
throw something else on your plate.
I want to get you. Well, if I'm doing it, I'm going to have you guys on for sure.
Okay.
Because I know you guys. I don't know the whole story here. I know a little bit about because you guys shared a little bit with me off camera, but I want to hear what you guys have to say. I know there's a story that I want to hear about it.
I think you should start a podcast.
Okay, I'll let you know. Maybe
I'll help you.
I'll help you start it. Part of my story, and I tell this literally when I speak at 12-step meetings, one of my one-liner jokes, I got rewards points to every psych ward on 45th Street. I always joke about that. A lot of experience being Baker acted.
See, I never was. I'm an alcoholic drunk from backwoods Pennsylvania. I didn't even know what really drugs were. I mean, I dabbled in them. Well, I had a friendly relationship with Xanax and cocaine here and there. That was kind of my side chick. But alcohol was my thing. I grew up in about 40 miles north of Pittsburgh. And I came down here and started meeting all these drug addicts and people talking about copping drugs and doing this and doing that. And I'm like, what? I got sober at 26. But, for as long as Ben and I have been doing this, there's really not much we haven't seen in terms of, substance abuse stories and stuff like that. But we're right there with you. We want to help everybody in the worst way. And oftentimes it's, we deal with the same thing. It's like sometimes it's harder to deal with the parents and the loved ones than it is dealing with the client themselves. So it's a balancing act, but we're going to get you back on. We'll talk about something completely different.
I love it.
I'm going to help you start your own podcast too.
I love it.
Yeah. Ben, any final thoughts?
No, I had a wonderful time. Thank you for...
Did you lift, by the way, today? Because
this morning.
You did. I know you did.
Actually, my 14-year-old son for about the last 3 weeks maybe been getting me to take him before school. So we're getting up at 5 a.m. I'm like, I love it, man.
I'm starting to develop a complex here.
What do you mean?
Because everybody's, Ben, you're the big lifter. Blah, blah. Yeah, I'm probably stronger than Ben. You know that.
Probably stronger than both of us, I'm sure.
Yeah, see? Ben looks better, but at least I can squat and deadlift. Ben can't. He'll blow his back out.
Oh, my back's real bad.
Yeah, you won't get me deadlifting. I learned that lesson a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, see, I'm good. I'm limber. Oh, I'm not. I'm starting to get some aches and pains in my knees. My knees are starting to pop. That's a new thing. Anyways, thanks for coming on, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Both of you.
All right. That is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us. info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And if you need to get in contact with Mark for whatever reason, Mark, where could they find you?
So the two websites are bakeractattorneys.com, and then the other one is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, or X or whatever they call it now, Instagram, TikTok, and the main number of the office is 561-419-6095. So,
and you're on all those social media handles at what, Mark Astor? Or?
Yeah, just Google Mark G. Astor, you'll find me.
Okay, cool. All right, that is it. We will see y'all later.
Thank you.